Your relationship at home with your kids has an expiration date. 18 years, and typically they're gone building their own lives. But a strong marriage doesn't expire. It's supposed to outlast everything. My guest today has been married 31 years, he's raised 2 daughters, and he coaches men on how to win at work and at home. And he says most dads have it backwards. So today, he's going to walk you through the things that he actually does and he teaches, including something that he likes to call getting a PhD in your wife.
The name of my book is How I Lost My Left Nut and Other Life Lessons. And don't let the title fool you. It's basically a series of 17 different stories that have happened in our lives. Some super funny, some more poignant. And but there's a lesson in each one and a strategy to implement them in your life.
Love it. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I do want to go a little deeper into the book and some of those lessons. And I know one thing that you touch on is this concept of winning at work while losing at home. And I know there's a lot of really, really hardworking dads listening to this podcast. So I'm sure this concept can be familiar to them. So I wanted to know from you how common this pattern is that you see in the men that you work with. And do most men even realize that it's happening? Or is it something that kind of is a sneaky buildup and then more of an explosion later?
I think it can be both, but I think for the most part, men, they kind of have there's a burden on men, especially dads, but I think and this is, not necessarily this is a little bit contrary to what people say about men currently. But with dads, we really want to be the provider, the protector. We give up a lot for our families, but a lot of times we actually wrap that, and I'm embarrassed to say I've used this phrase myself. Look, if we didn't have the lifestyle we have and we didn't have to support that, then I wouldn't have to work this hard to support that, which is complete BS. It really is a situation where then I'm justifying the amount of work I'm doing and the way that I'm not necessarily showing up for my family. And it was complete nonsense when I said it. It's nonsense now. I think a lot of guys will say some variation thereof, but I think it's this underpinning of things that we feel like, and we feel this pressure where we want to be there for our family, engaged with the family, do the things we know we need to do. And in my own life, and I can go more into this story later, but in my own life, I really didn't know what to do with my new little daughter when she was born. And I was really, really good at my job. So Tony Robbins talks about the basic 2 things that we do. We try to avoid pain and seek pleasure in life. And that's what I did. I was really great at my job. I had great opportunities, friends, going through the ranks, all that stuff. So my choice was kind of like this thing I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be a dad at that point. Didn't have really a lot of role models in my life to show me how to do that, but I was really good at my job. So I moved my energy more towards my job, which almost cost me all my marriage and my family, which is crazy. And I think that that's what happens to a lot of men, is that we wrap this vocational, whether we're self-employed or work for somebody else, it doesn't really matter, but we wrap our vocation and the efforts there because we can sometimes get more out of it. And it's just an easier path for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you have a lot of responsibilities and pressures as a father and a husband, and it is a lot. And working hard, is no small feat, and providing for a family, especially as it's growing. So I can only imagine the amount of pressure that dads have on themselves. But it is interesting because a lot of times, the daughters specifically, we're not asking for that kind of support, and I think there's all these goals and missions that you have on as a father, kind of like in your lane, and things that you want to achieve and goals that you set. But from a daughter's perspective, we just want your presence,
Yeah.
And I think that when dads don't know what to do, maybe, then they revert to what they think is the best thing. And providing and protecting the family is a wonderful thing. But if you're missing this element of connection, then what is it for? I think a lot of daughters will feel the same in that they'd rather their dad spend, or provide a little bit less and be more present. And it's not even about like number of hours spent or minutes spent. It's really about that physical presence of feeling connected and feeling wanted, and like your dad cares about what you have going on in your world. So I think this is probably one of the most common frictions between like fathers and daughters, specifically in the US, but probably in a lot of other countries as well, just because we have such a work-oriented culture. But yeah, it's just I'm glad you're writing about this and speaking about this and helping fathers with this, because I think it's something that so many men struggle with. And being able to have a plan of action and understanding the daughter's perspective as well helps kind of move in the right direction so that you can have both. You can have the marriage, you can have the mission, and you can have the man and what he needs as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think what a lot of times we don't realize that being a provider isn't just putting food on the table, putting a roof over their heads. It's actually providing a life.
Yes.
Right. I talk a lot about, kind of building your life versus using, basically you're supposed to use money and your job to build your life, not the other way around. And I think
Right.
a lot of times they do that. And when it comes to relationships with your wife and your daughter and your sons and whoever, that is part of the provision, is to provide that direct contact with your daughters, to make sure that you have that good relationship. You're feeding into their lives and providing. You're basically teaching them what it means to be a woman in the context of you as the father.
Yeah.
And what I had this. I was just thinking about this conversation I had with a guy, and this is in particular about his wife, but it could apply to daughters too. I met with him. We were talking at a party, and he was talking about all the struggles he was having. He was a very successful guy that was doing 7 figures in his business, and his wife had been begging him to work out with her. And he was just like, I never have time. I don't put it as a priority and all that. And so I just asked him a simple question. I'm like, if let's say tomorrow God decides to give you a choice, your businesses or your wife, or in this case, your wife, your family, your daughter, your sons, which would you choose? And of course, he's like, my family. I'm like, well, all right. What you're telling me is that you're not actually living that out.
Right.
You're choosing your businesses over your wife. You don't know how many workouts you have an opportunity to do, conversations you can have. And so I would encourage the men that are listening to that to ask themselves that kind of question, and where they're spending their time and where they're spending their effort.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think doing a calendar audit is very indicative of where your time is actually being spent, right? Like, I think a lot of men and a lot of women and most people would say, yeah, family first and relationships first. But if you look at your calendar and you see what you're actually spending time on, then you can really reflect and say, okay, am I living up to those goals and expectations that I have for myself? And yeah, I think that's a really good point, and just a healthy check-in and reminder, because it's easy to get off course, especially I feel like work and being busy. There's something really fulfilling and kind of addictive about it, because it feels good to feel productive for a lot of people, right? And to provide and to feel like you're doing good for the family. But if you say the family is your number one priority, yeah, take a look at your calendar and see how many date nights you have this month or last month, how much time you're spending with your children, how that time is spent. Do you count watching movies with the family as your primary time with the family, or is it conversations at the dinner table with no distractions and family walks around the neighborhood, or taking your daughter one-on-one out for lunch? Those are higher value moments versus just kind of the distracted time in the same space, but not real connection.
Yeah. I have this method I talk about, which is called the threshold method. And if you're a guy that has a hard time making that transition from work to family, like work to husband and dad, like I'm a business guy or I'm an employee or whatever, what I encourage men, because I work with men, to do is so let's say you pull into your garage, you have that, what we call a man door, which is the door between the garage and the house. To actually, that's like a construction term.
I've never heard that.
That's a man door, which I would say, okay, that's a garage door, or I left the package next to the man door near the garage. That's a thing. But so like let's say you park your car in the garage or outside or whatever, you stop at the threshold of that door and you mentally change hats.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that looks like for you, it could be a code or whatever, but you mentally change the perspective that, okay, I am now entering my home and I have to leave this other version of myself here. And so that way I can be the best that I can be there. And that may mean, all right, your phone goes in your home office at home and it just stays there and for the rest of the day would be great if you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's strategies to do that. But I think that methodology then helps to be able to do that. But to your point, making sure that your calendar, they say the same thing with checkbook, right? No one uses checkbooks anymore, but your bank account. If you audit your bank account, you can tell where your priorities are. And if you audit your calendar, you can also tell the same thing.
Exactly. I love that advice on kind of the transition time, though, before you go into family time. And I think that's great advice for anyone, even, just task switching. If you're in a go, go, go mode and then you're about to go do something else, or if you're coming from a sports thing and then, it's a good practice to center yourself before entering a different environment because you bring the energy that you previously carried with you. And if you're a dad and you're working really hard and you have this energy of kind of stress and drive and go, 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 you don't want to bring that into the family and, expose everyone to that kind of frequency, not to get all woo-woo on you, but so I really like that advice. And I think even, if you work from home, for example, and it's 5:00, if that's how you manage your calendar, and it's time for family, then maybe even instead of just leaving the room and going into the living room, take a quick walk or have some time in between, maybe 15 minutes, just kind of like relax or listen to some music or just breathe and then go into the family time. Because I think daughters especially, we can really feel energy. And so if you are stressed with other things that are not related to the family, it can actually feel like maybe it's the daughter's fault or that we're causing some of the stress. So just being mindful of, what you're bringing into the space is a good practice.
And it's a great conversation. That's a great conversation to have with your family also, which I'm all about communication and talking to your family about these things. Hey, look, when I got off work, I have a 15-minute drive home and that's not enough, right? I'm in traffic. People want to cut me off and I have road rage or whatever. So when I get home, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to practice this, changing my mindset. But then what I'd love to do is like, can I go into my home office or the back to the garage or wherever that is, whatever that looks like. And I need 10 minutes to really get that switch kind of completed. And that, whether it's prayer or meditation or just, lack of thought, like literally turn your brain off so that you can make that transition, because it's, our brains just never shut off. And so if you don't make that switch, it's really difficult to engage with your family at the level that you should.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to bring up a common topic of yours throughout the book and the work that you do. But you believe that marriage comes first, even before kids. And I just want to talk about that and why you're such a big believer in this. I agree, but I think it's a really important thing because a lot of people they find that quite shocking and a little bit offensive sometimes. So let's talk about it.
It's not necessarily a popular opinion, but I can prove it statistically that it's a good idea. I can prove it anecdotally in my own life, and the guys that I work with that actually practice this makes all the difference in the world. So I'll tell you, I used to joke with I'll give you a personal story, but I used to joke with my girls, I'll make 2 more that look just like you. Mom is much more important. Right. And I use this language that when my girls were disrespectful to my wife, it was never, hey, you don't talk to your mom that way. It was always, you don't talk to my wife that way.
Mm.
because there is a very specific delineation between my relationship with my wife and my relationship with my girls. And I'll put it this way, it's our relationship with our children, even if you don't want to believe this, is essentially temporary. It's 18 years that you have that day-to-day thing. My girls are 28 and 26, as I mentioned. One lives in upstate New York, one lives in Atlanta, I'm in Montana. We're not engaged on a daily basis. Even if we have phone calls and FaceTimes and all that stuff, it's not the same. My wife and I, we've been married now for 31 years. If we live long enough, we may be married for 70 years. And so what people do is they say, well, my kids are way more important. And I've seen this on social media that my son is way more important than my husband and always will be. The consequence of that is that you and your son will have a relationship and your husband will now be your ex-husband, typically.
Mm.
And we've seen it over and over again. Wherever you put your energy, the relationship you put the most energy into is the one that's going to thrive the most. And by using your marriage as that, like in my opinion, making your marriage the number one thing does a few things. First of all, it's a longer relationship. It's designed to be that way. It's a more intimate relationship, also designed to be that way. And it should be, other than your relationship with God, the most important relationship in your life. But kids are learning what it means to be married and have relationships based on what your relationship looks like. And in my own life, we really we always had our date nights and, like I talked about with the way that if they would be disrespectful or whatever, but our time was sacred. Like I'm not going to say, okay, we're going to go do this, even though I had plans with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And a poignant thing happened. I talk about this in the book, but there was a time where my youngest daughter sent me a text on Father's Day that still makes me kind of tear up thinking about it and reading about it. And I actually have the full text in there, in the book. But she basically said, I always loved that I knew that mom was the most important person in the family, because that took this burden that so many kids have, which is, what's going to happen? What if mom and dad divorce like my friends did? What if mom and dad
Mm-hmm.
are fighting? Or what if mom and dad can't get along or whatever? Because she said that gave me the security that I never had to worry about that. I knew that you guys were 100% solid, was no worries of mine. And then I knew that out of that love and that relationship that you were able to feed into our relationship. And so that, to me, solidified what I've believed for, our entire time of having kids.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And from a daughter's perspective, I can totally attest to this, and what your daughter was experiencing as well. I think, safety and security are things that daughters specifically are always looking for and wanting from their family and just internally. And having a mom and dad who love each other and it is very clear that they are each other's priorities provides such a blanket of safety and security for the daughter. So, yeah, I think a lot of moms specifically, feel like the kids are the most important thing. And I think that's a motherly, natural, inclination and instinct. But it's really important to talk about this concept because of what it does for the kids and how maybe putting your wife first is actually putting your kids first. Like it's both at the same time, I believe. And I posted a short on YouTube about this, and I got so much hate, especially from women saying like, "How dare you say this? My kids are definitely the most important thing," and men are this and that, and it was sad because they're missing the point, and the point is not that your kids are not important. Hello, this podcast is
Right.
all about the father-daughter relationship. Like, the daughters are very important. I really care about this relationship. But I think from a daughter's perspective, having that blueprint, that modeling, that trust and that security, it's such a wonderful gift to give them. So,
Well, even if you just look at it logically, like take all the love and connection and all that stuff out, like your kids will leave your house, hopefully.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're totally upside down in the way that you raise your children, because that's the intention, is that they eventually leave and start their own lives as adults, and they live the rest of their lives outside of your house. And this is why I think that mismatch priority, we've dealt with a lot of couples when they get to that time frame when their kids leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
And the moms are absolutely devastated. The dads can be devastated too, but to your point earlier, it's the moms. And it's like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, did you think they were just going to live here for the rest of their lives? Because that's the natural progression of life,
Right.
at least in Western society. And I know in different societies, you kind of have the family home. But what we've seen over and over again is you get to be the time when they leave and you literally have no relationship with your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've had women be like, well, now I raised my kids and I'm going to go find myself
Right.
and so that's where you get, if you look statistically, that time frame, that kind of 15 to 25 years of marriage is a very strong, that's a big time for divorce
Mm-hmm.
because of they have no relationship because they've invested. And I will caveat, right? Like I'm not an idiot. When the kids are babies and toddlers and all that, you're not going to go on date night and duct tape your kid to the wall, right?
Right.
Like, like there
There's
are
seasons
times
of
when your kids have to have physical priority
yeah.
over, but it is about, even during those times, there are ways that we teach that you can continue to build and foster that relationship with your spouse and make
Mm-hmm.
it very important even when you're in those times.
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit about how dads can do that and how men can continue to build a relationship with their wife and prioritize their wife throughout, the seasons of having children and beyond. And one thing that you had mentioned in our previous conversation was you talk about getting a PhD in your wife, which stands for pursuing her desires. So, what does that look like? Do you have any examples? Yeah, let's just talk more about specifics on how dads can really prioritize their wife.
Yeah, I mean, I think really, you did things when you were dating your wife that were designed to woo her, make her love you, help her to love you and see you as valuable and see her as she then felt valued and pursued and cherished and all of those words. And so we teach a couple different things, but servant leadership is a big thing that we teach. But in terms of pursuing her desires, it really is, you should know your wife almost better than she knows herself. And this is true for us.
Mm-hmm.
After 31 years, like we can read each other very well, but like I know the things that she loves. We had a conversation yesterday. She was struggling with some stuff on one of our 2 daily walks. We walk together in the morning and walk together in the afternoon. Another good example.
Mm-hmm.
But on one of our walks, she's struggling with some different things that and I'm like, well, here's what happened 5 years ago. And this is kind of what I think you're dealing with. And I'm not, psychoanalyzing her, but and so I know her well enough that I know the desires of her heart, so that then I can say, well, here's what I think really would help in this case. So that's kind of like a much more deep level. But at the end of the day, it's like, if she likes doing this, so my wife likes going to the shooting range. We like guns. We're in Montana. 82% of people have guns here. So if you're not a gun person, then pick your pick your hobby of choice. But so we make time to go and actually do that. She likes working on cars, so we built a Jeep for her. Like we did it. So we do lots of stuff like that. But a great example in our life is one of my degrees is in exercise physiology. And I was a personal trainer and I ran large health clubs. So we have always worked out together during our marriage. And we were like, man, we feel so disconnected right now. What is like, and we kind of got it down to the fact where we weren't working out together. We had kind of started different schedules and not necessarily connecting in that way. So now what I do is I actually block my calendar until 9 a.m. every day. Like you can't get on my calendar before 9. And because we have that time reserved, we get up in the morning, we take a walk, we do our weights, we have breakfast together, and then we kind of both start our days. Now, I know that's not practical for everyone, but that's an example of things that you can do. On Tuesday of last week, it was my wife's birthday, and she loves huckleberry picking. And if you're not from this area, like the Pacific Northwest, Montana, those areas, huckleberries are very difficult to find. and you can't grow them commercially, so they have to be picked.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, I really want to go huckleberry picking. I'm like, okay, where do you want to go? Well, I want to go to Kellogg, Idaho, which is 4.5 hours from here, by the way. So I'm like, cool, let's go. I'll take Tuesday off. And to add more kind of weight to this, I had just been on a men's mastermind in the mountains for 6 days. So I hadn't worked in 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
I had gotten 1 day in the office, and then it was her birthday. I'm like, all right, cool, let's go. We'll figure it out. And so we drove 4.5 hours, picked for 5 hours, and drove 4.5 hours back. She absolutely loved that day. Like, she could not have had a better way to celebrate her birthday from what she told me. And it's sacrificing for me, right? Like, I needed that time to work, but I didn't need it bad enough that I would say, well, I'm sorry, we can't celebrate your birthday in the way that you want to celebrate it. So I long answer to a short question, but I think that gives some examples of how we.
Definitely. No, I think that's really important. And I love how you said your wife's values and interests, right? Like you were able to provide direction for her based on her internal compass and what she wants out of life and what she cares about. And I think that's a really, really good thing for everyone to think about, even for women to think about with their partners. But it's not just about what they like in that moment in terms of hobbies or interests. It's who they are as a person and what they care about. So I think that's a really good point and good pointers.
Yeah, back to that point real quick, just because it's a little bit of what we talked about. If you don't have that connection and make that the priority, you don't know those things.
Right.
And what I find, and I think as a woman, you could probably attest to this, which is women tend to be their own worst critics.
Yeah.
And for my wife particularly, she is a person that if there is a conflict, then she is to blame. That's just kind of her natural compass. And so what I'm able to do through our conversations is I actually come to her defense against her. If that makes sense. It's like, hey, this is what you're thinking. This is what you're thinking. And it's nonsense. Like, it's not true about yourself, but I can do that because I know her well enough that I can dig into those parts of her personality and her psyche and her heart. The most important thing, I can dig into her parts of her heart to say, I know this is what you feel, and that's just not true.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, women, I talk a lot about this on this podcast, that we are wonderful storytellers, and the way that we can take a fact and it becomes a feeling that is so real for us that's pretty separate from what that fact actually is pretty wild, actually. And it is really refreshing and nice when a man who is very logical and can see things from a different perspective help ourselves kind of unravel that story and get back to the fact. Or and obviously this needs to be done in a very understanding way, and a very
without the let me solve your problem right now, right? Like, that's
yes.
right.
Without that, and without like basically telling us that our story is not true, or like because that can translate to we're crazy. Like, we made this up. That's not true. So it's a tricky thing to navigate, but when you kind of come at it as a man and father and a husband, because all these things we're talking about with wives, it's really the same with daughters. They're just a miniature version. When you're coming at it with a sense of understanding and you're almost playing the role of like detective rather than like, I know the answer and here it is, then it helps us kind of come to the conclusion as well. It's almost like we're figuring it out together. But to your point, knowing her values and knowing her direction and her heart helps you kind of navigate those situations and help her come to the conclusions that you might already be aware of, but she just needs to kind of get there through the process of conversation and talking, because that's how we come to our truth, not just by being given the answer.
Yeah, because I can tell her the parts of her story that are not true about her. And because I can say, let me tell you what I know about you, not let me tell you how I can fix this, what I think the solution to your quote unquote problem is. And because then I can then feed back into what I know to be, what she really does know to be true about herself, or she hasn't heard enough times
Mm-hmm.
to believe that. I use this phrase with my wife, and I would encourage dads to use this with your daughter too. If you could see you the way that I see you, you would never have any self-esteem problems ever. Because it really is. Sorry, I get a little choked up.
Oh.
But it really is a situation where women, especially girls and wives, like your daughters and your wives, they are told by the world so much that they aren't enough. And so then that shapes the story. My wife is an absolute badass. Like, she's a Jeep racer, a boxer, a welder, a fabricator, like does all this crazy stuff. Stay-at-home mom turned into all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So fully objectively, she's awesome. But she's got that voice in her head that tells her she's not good enough, or she has this thing that's really important and this thing that's really important. And those are the negative parts of her personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think young girls especially are told the same thing, especially when they get to be preteens and teens and all that. And as a dad, and look, I am no expert father. Like, if you ask both of my girls, I apologized a lot because I screwed up a lot, and I still do. But your job is to really continue to help them determine who they are as a young woman and as a woman in general, and to show them their value. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of that burden resides in us as men, as dads, because we're teaching them not only who they are, but the type of man that they should be looking for, to then remind them who.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a really, really good point. And I think the world is especially hard for girls and women, not to say poor us or anything like that, but it's just a confusing time for us and for men too, but specifically with goals and the workplace and motherhood and all these options for women and the paths that we want to go down. There's just a lot that we feel that we have to do, I think. And I think this idea of feeling enough, which is what you were bringing up, is so important. Like, we have value just for existing. And that is what we need to know in our hearts to be true, not for what we do or what career path we decide to go down, or if we're going to be a mom or not. And especially, that rings true as you get older. And if you have started to pursue a career and then all of a sudden, you're feeling your biological drive to be a mom and you really want to care for children, but you also have a society telling you that you are just as good as men. You can do all these things just like men, and you can have this amazing career and, go work in the office and be a mom and all these things. And it's really a struggle for a lot of women. I've been talking to a ton of women in the community about this identity crisis that women have right now of like, is being a mom enough? And do I have worth if I am a mom and I just want to take care of the kids and the family? Or do I need to go, be this incredible workaholic, woman as well, which a lot of women want that only, or they want both. And some of them want none. And it's, I think, really confusing for women because from a young age, you're taught you can do everything and you should do everything and try harder and do more and be more successful. And it's these narratives that make us feel like we're always underwater and we're always below the threshold of what we should be, instead of feeling like we're good. Anything that we do is cherries on top, and it's amazing, and it's good to have goals and feel really good about achieving them. But I think there's a lot of rhetoric around we're just not good enough. There's just so much more to do. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's crazy with the whole, because my wife she's got a degree in PR and she worked in PR, and she took quote unquote early retirement when I got my first health club, which was like 2 years into our marriage. We didn't even have kids at that time. And she hasn't had a real job, outside the home since. Dude, we love we have had the most awesome life because of it. And we've talked, off and on when business is slower or whatever, should I get a job? from her. And I'm like, absolutely not. Do you realize what our life would look like if you had a 9 to 5 and we had to adjust our schedule and all that kind of stuff? And so she has, so I've always embraced that choice because she doesn't want to get a job. So
Right.
that's her choice. But I think we do tell women that you can have it all. And it's just, there's only so many hours in the day and so much energy. Like if you want to be like a career woman and boss babe and all those things and work 60 hours a week and your husband and you're married and your husband is down with that and you guys can work that out, then that's a great choice for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if then you say, well, I also want to have 4 kids and take care of those 4 kids while doing all this other stuff, it's in some ways impractical, just because there's only so much time
Yeah.
in the day. And I mean, I would say the same thing if a guy wants to be the primary caregiver of children and run a full business, it would be the same thing. Like it's not like it's any different between it's a human factor. It's not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, obviously I value that hugely. Our kids were both homeschooled. We did 100-day road trip with them and we actually pulled them out of school to do it. They were in school at the time, but like we couldn't have done that and had that
Right.
experience. And so, yeah, give yourself some grace. Right. And I use this phrase, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And so, you don't have to let society tell you that you have to be whatever it is that they're telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great message for dads to relay to their daughters too, especially in the foundational years and as she gets into middle school and high school and there's all these opportunities and goals and everything. I think having goals is important and feeling like you're doing something worthy, for yourself is important, but it shouldn't be worthy in terms of external pressures or what society is telling you equals worthy. And I think I definitely fell into that trap, just wanting to be the president of every club and do all these things and constantly looking for accomplishments to kind of feed my sense of self-worth. And that was not my dad's fault or my mom's fault or anything. Like, it's just kind of my wiring. But I went into finance. I got the internship, I got the job. And it's funny because I went to UCLA and I had one of my friends was in all my classes. We got the same internship, got the same job, worked at the same place. And for her, she was thriving. It was her dream come true. She was so good at it. She just understood it through and through. She's still in finance and she's still kicking butt and loving every minute of it. She's married and I'm sure she'll have kids. She's told me about that. So to your point, it's different for everyone. You have to follow your heart as a woman. But for me, I got shingles when I was 22 because I was so stressed out. And I was in a job that was not feeding my soul at all. And it was a great company. I loved the people. It was, in terms of finance, it was more client focused instead of like numbers focused, but it was still too much for me. And I came to that realization and I wanted to do something more creative and something a little bit more fulfilling. And that's when all the girl dad ideas and, I got some like ideas from above and I just kind of ran with it. And it's been the best thing for me. And I've really enjoyed it. But I think the main thing is every girl is different. Every woman is different. So it's a wonderful time where we have so many options and opportunities as women. And I'm so grateful for that because I wouldn't want anyone telling me you have to stay home with children and you can't have a job. But I also think that we've swung so far in the other direction of you've got to do everything all at once and you have to succeed and thrive in all of it and in your marriage, right? So it's like, there's just so much pressure on women. Yeah, no pressure. Smile also and make sure everyone thinks you're having the most wonderful
time. And look beautiful and have the perfect figure and all of that stuff as well.
So
right? Like
much
there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I think this is just a really healthy reminder of what goes on in the woman's brain and kind of the pressures that we experience even starting at younger ages and how important it is as fathers to be a source where daughters can come to and talk to about these things and let her know that she is worthy for just being herself and for being alive and that you love her and you're proud of her just for that. And anything beyond that is cherries on top.
Right. I love that.
Yeah. But you have raised some really strong, wonderful, independent women who are doing great things in the world. And I did want to ask you about how intentional some of the elements of raising daughters have been and how that has played out in terms of their lives and their careers.
We took I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always been one. I'm for 30 plus years, 35 years. And we take a very entrepreneurial approach to life is the way I say that. And what I mean by that is that we say yes a lot to different things. Like pulling them out of school and going on a road trip to 34 states over the 3.5 months. And, we ended up buying a vacation rental that I turned into a business in Orlando. And we would spend 8 weeks a year there and go to Disney every day. We went 62 times in 1 year, by the way. But we were 10 minutes from the park. So we could do that. And being an entrepreneur, I made it work. It actually paid for itself and made money and all that thing. And so we actually did that with education as well. Like I said, our kids went to school, public school, until they were 5th and 6th grade. And they were like, hey, we want to have this different lifestyle. So we're going to do this. What do you guys think? Do you guys think this would be a good idea? And they're like, absolutely. Sounds great. So we homeschooled them. And one of my daughters, my youngest daughter, kind of sucked at homeschool, if I'm honest. And she would attest to this, but she was very, very good at language. So she went when she was 14, she got to this point where it's like, she just was miserable trying to do, math and science and all of those things. And so we sent her to Costa Rica for 2 stints of 3 months, to a Spanish immersion school. And she basically did those same things. She learned those things, but she did it in full Spanish immersion. So she is actually trilingual. So she speaks English, Spanish, and ASL because she's deaf in one ear, and actually almost fully deaf now due to some health concerns that she's had. So she went down that road and she was able to do that. Both of the girls left home at 17. Both started college. My oldest one decided it wasn't for her. My youngest one took a break and then became a paramedic. So she was one of the youngest paramedics that were at her particular company in Atlanta. And then, just to encourage you homeschool parents, she actually has a degree in neuroscience. So and she was working at the time and dealing with all these health things at the time. I'm super proud of her that she did that. But because we gave her options to explore how she would like to approach education, I feel like that helped her down that path to be able to kind of figure out what she wants to do. She was kind of doing pre-med. She wanted to go down that road, and she decided, so she's got this autoimmune thing that we've been chasing for 6 years, and hopefully we'll have some answers soon on that, but she ended up not going down that route. But she became a paramedic. My daughter, and this is an interesting thing that I want to tell dads too, that has been a little bit of struggle with. My oldest daughter is a waitress. She chose that as her career. And I think so much we kind of devalue that service type position. So I've worked really hard to not say just as part of that description. She kills it she is the best waitress that I've actually ever seen. And she gets reviews and accolades and makes a crap ton of money, by the way, as a waitress. My encouragement is don't put a just in front of anything. If your daughter is all right, I'm going to do this temporarily and then I'm on to something else, totally cool. She has actually just found a career she's really, really good at. And she moved herself to Hawaii when she was 18. She had saved up a bunch of money and she became a waitress in Hawaii and was thriving there, even though Hawaii is crazy expensive. But then she's continued to do that. So, I raise these girls to take, even though that's not, and the younger one is more entrepreneurial in terms of career. She's started a new resale store. So she's kind of doing that thing. And so she kind of has more of the bug entrepreneurially than my older daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's like, hey, this is what I want to do.
I love that. And I love your support and encouragement for both of their paths. It sounds like they know how proud you are of them and feel your love and support. So, yeah, I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope so. And it's funny. I was thinking about this before we get on the podcast today, that my oldest daughter bought a house from 1897. So the
Wow.
house is 130 years old. And if you've ever been in a
Yeah.
130-year-old house, you know that there's all sorts of crap that goes on. Well, so about a year ago, actually, no, 2 years ago, because she pointed this out, 2 years ago, I took her to an investment property that I'd purchased, and we renovated the house. So like we tore out walls and we did plumbing and all this stuff, not even knowing that she was going to buy this house.
Right.
And so she got on a FaceTime with me yesterday and was showing me like the bathroom that she had just finished and remodeled. And she was super excited and super proud and all that. So like she has that bug and the younger one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But like I taught her this very DIY, like don't be afraid of DIY. And so she's continued to build these skills. And she says, some people have Google and ChatGPT. I have Kevin Davis on FaceTime.
That's an honor. Well, we are coming up on time here, but I did want to just close out with one final piece of advice that you have for all the girl dads listening.
I mean, I think we kind of talked about it already, but as a dad, your job is to show your daughter at least two things. A, what it means to be treated, how she should be treated by men, and two, the kind of man that she needs to look for. And so I always challenge men to say, are you the type of man, husband, and father that your daughter would want to marry?
Mm-hmm.
Because, dude, that could be a hard. I mean, I've asked myself that, and a lot of times I'll say no. And so, what do you need to do? How can you take action to then become that man? And quite frankly, ask your daughter. Look, are you? How am I doing? Like, how can I serve you better? How can I teach you better? How can I be a better man and better dad? Because it's man and dad, like you're both.
Right.
In order to show you what these things mean.
Thank you. That's wonderful advice, and goes back to kind of that audit of the calendar and just auditing your life in general and making sure that your actions are following your intentions and your words. So great
For sure.
advice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for being here. This is a fun and engaging and really inspirational episode. So thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you very much.